I'm Mike Berners-Lee. I'm a professor at Lancaster University. I'm the author of some books, including most recently There Is No Planet B, but also How Bad a Banana is the Carbon Footprint of Everything. But most of my time I spend running my business, which is called Small World Consulting, which is an associate company of Lancaster University and is based in the university. And Small World exists to help organizations to make an appropriate response to the climate and ecological emergency that we're in. We've been working with the AMRC for probably about 2 years now, and it began with a request for us to take a holistic look at the organization and ask that big question, to what extent is it doing everything that it could to help create the conditions under which the world can get on top of the climate and environmental emergency that we're in. So we did this kind of holistic assessment, and out of that came some potential actions, and one of those was to try to create a framework by which projects could be assessed according to the extent to which they stood to bring about that transition that we need. The sustainability agenda is incredibly complex and multidimensional, and it's not just climate and biodiversity and pollution, although it does include all those things, but it also, if we want to deal with all those environmental challenges, it also relates to our economics and our politics and inequality and all sorts of other things as well. So the upshot is that what it means for an organization to be making an appropriate response is it affects everything that every organization thinks, says, and does. So it's a real challenge to be coherently doing the right thing on this agenda. One of the challenges for humanity is to have a new relationship with technology, because technology has brought us many wonderful things over the last centuries, but it's also taken us to the very dangerous place that we're at the moment. And going forwards, we absolutely need some new technologies like crazy in order to enable the low carbon transition, the energy transition, a sustainable food system, all of that. But we need to get much better at picking which technologies we go with and which ones we actually leave on the shelf, because there are some technologies that will give us an efficiency improvement, but they're not actually in the best interests of people and planet. So why it's so exciting for us to be working with AMRC is that they are really trying to do a proper job of carefully selecting which technologies are important for people and planet now, and therefore which ones do we want to support and which ones actually aren't going to do us any good. The sustainability agenda really, I mean, honestly, it affects everything about how we do life and how we do work. There's no getting around it. It affects how we get to work. It affects how we work in our offices. It affects how we travel. And of course, it affects the work that we do, and it affects everything about how we live when we get home. I mean, there's no getting around it. Humans need to learn to live differently, and if we get it right, it's a chance to live better, enjoy our lives more, have more thriving businesses. It's an employment opportunity. It's an opportunity to have more fulfillment in the workplace. If we get it right, it's fantastic, but there's no getting around it. Just about everything needs to change in one way or another. So what we advise every business is to understand where its carbon is, including the carbon, of course, the carbon in its supply chains, and then to pick its battles accordingly. And it's different for every business. So, For some office-based businesses, it might all be around a few people's international travel. That might be, that might be the biggest deal. If you're anywhere in the food industry, then it's likely to be about what are your ingredients and how much meat and dairy is there in those ingredients, and how were they produced. And if you're in the business of making physical things, then it'll be about how are they made? Are they made out of sustainable materials? Are they built to last? Are they built to be repaired? Can they be recycled properly? And all of that, those questions of the circular economy. And, can the products themselves be dematerialized at all? So it's a very different question for every business. So the question of what effect does technology have on us is a really interesting one. And the question of who is in control of our technology is an interesting one, because we like to think that, of course, we control our technology because we're the great inventors of it. But if you look at it another way, maybe we're not in the control yet that we think we are, because there's a kind of an inevitable dynamic going on at the moment, which is that humans invent things because we can, and because it's fun, and because there's a commercial incentive to do so. And once we invent something that offers an efficiency improvement, we have a market economy. And in that market economy, if anybody adopts that technology, then everybody else has to, because otherwise they're commercially disadvantaged. And so we end up on this kind of treadmill of ever increasing technology, whether we like it or not. And, I'm not anti-technology, but when I say we need to renegotiate our relationship with technology, I think that is a huge challenge for us, because if you take technology as a whole, it has given us many great things in life, but it's also taken us to this very dangerous position that we're in at the moment, where we're so environmentally destructive. And so somehow we have to have greater agency over that trajectory of technology. We have to get much better at selecting the ones that are good for people and planet and pushing them really hard. And we have to acquire the ability to leave on the shelf technologies that aren't good for people and planet, even if they give us an efficiency improvement. Average UK person's carbon footprint can be divided up into 4 roughly equal quarters. So the first one is about the food they eat, and the biggest things to for most people there are to reduce the amount of meat and dairy, especially the beef and lamb, and to make sure that we eat everything that we buy. After that, there are sort of subsidiary questions about avoiding hot housing of out of season fruit and veg, and excess packaging and things like that. Then the next quarter is about home energy use, and of course we hear an awful lot about that, and it's about everything from turning lights off to trying to insulate your house to fitting a heat pump and solar panels if you can afford to. So we hear a lot about that quarter. Then the third quarter is travel, and the 2 big deals in travel are, first up, cars. And even if we electrify our cars, we still need to reduce the mileage, drive them more carefully, lift share where we can, try and find other forms of transport, and especially, better still, get on a bike or walk wherever we can. That's driving. And the second big deal is flying, which of course for many people is not an issue at all because they never fly. And for some people, they fly so much that it's the only thing they should really be thinking about. But there's no getting around the enormous carbon footprint of flying, and no, you can't offset it. And then the final quarter is the everything else quarter. But in there is all the non-edible things that we buy, including the sort of physical stuff from furniture to clothing to IT equipment to everything you can think of. And that's about dematerializing, making it last, buying secondhand, buying from sustainably sourced companies and so on. But it also includes some of the services that we buy. So every time you spend money on anything at all, you're buying from a company, and that company is either doing the right thing to help us deal with the climate emergency, or it's not. So every time we spend money, we've got an opportunity to push for one future or another. And so far, I've described all the things the individual can do to cut their carbon footprint. But what I really want to say is that that's just the beginning. If you ask the bigger question, what can I do to push for a sustainable world? It's partly about sustainable consumption and cutting your carbon footprint and so on. But even more than that, you can exert your influence in other ways. So obviously, don't ever vote for any politician who doesn't totally get the importance of the climate and environmental emergency, and also isn't absolutely truthful all the time. Influence your workplace, including the AMRC, in every way you can. And I think there's good permission in the AMRC to go and, to push for, for environmental management. So that's great. But, also ask, what are all the other ways that I can exert my influence? Write to my MP. What about the conversations I have in the pub with my friends? There are opportunities to influence everywhere you look.